Big news this week. Pfizer and Moderna are going for the gold. They want a fourth dose, emergency use authorization for a fourth dose of their mRNA vaccine. For Pfizer, they're a little less ambitious. They're going for 65 years old and up. Moderna is going for everybody, 18 and up, for a fourth dose, EUA. I got a number of thoughts here. Number one, EUA. EUA means emergency use authorization. It's a special regulatory pathway that's used in the COVID-19 pandemic. I think it absolutely made sense for the first two doses. You want to get those things out as fast as possible. Does it make sense for the third dose, the fourth dose? Can we realistically say that a 20-year-old healthy person who has 3 doses in their arm is facing any sort of emergency that we would need to lower regulatory standards for a fourth dose? I think that's hard to believe. The next thing I would say is, in an ideal world, if you're going to try to give the fourth dose, or who knows what's coming next, the fifth dose, sixth dose, etc., you need to do a well-done randomized controlled trial of people who've gotten up to that many doses, randomize them to that fourth dose or no additional doses, and follow them for a whole bunch of endpoints. And the endpoints I want you to prove that you improve are severe disease, hospitalization, death. Can you further reduce that risk, which is already going to be really, really low after the first 3 doses? Can you further reduce that risk? And if you can't, then I think do not pass go. Do not collect X amount of dollars. You don't get to sell your product on the U.S. market. You need to prove to me you improve those outcomes. Now, what about the endpoint of antibody titers? I promise you, the more shots you give somebody, if you measure their antibody titer in the moment after that shot, it's going to be higher than if you didn't give them the shot. But whether that further reduces the risk of the outcomes that we care about, that remains to be seen. Symptomatic disease. Mild symptomatic disease. That's not a suitable endpoint. How does one offset a scratchy throat with the symptoms of the vaccine itself, as well as the fact that it has a cost and an inconvenience? That's not a clear trade-off. You need an overwhelming signal that the vaccine, the extra booster dose, confers a health benefit. Now, Pfizer, I think, is more modest. They're more restrained. They're going for 65 and older, where it is arguably more plausible that they would, in fact, have a hospitalization and severe disease benefit. Moderna, they're going for 18 and up, where it's really hard to believe that they would muster data that supports that claim. Now, I happen to know from the New York Times coverage that the data people are anchoring to, at least for the Pfizer claim, is a preprint that they posted looking at how people did in Israel who got 4 doses versus 3 doses. But that preprint has problems because the type of person who's going to rush out and get that 4th dose, that's a different type of person than the person who got 3 doses and decided to hang back a little bit. And that person who rushed out to get the 4th dose, proof that they're a different person and that it might not be the activity of the 4th dose that's resulting in the different endpoints, is that if you look at the data in that preprint, you will see on day 1 after the 4th dose, there is a big difference in the rate of symptomatic SARS-CoV-2. How could that be? A booster, even if it's wonderful, it can't work in 1 day. That's implausible. And what that suggests is residual confounding or some other difference between the group of people who got the 4th dose versus the 3 doses. The other paper that people cite is the paper that appeared about a week ago in the New England Journal of Medicine. It's a research letter. It is basically the experience of Israel, and it takes place in a setting where healthcare workers are screened for SARS-CoV-2, and it finds that people who got the booster have a 30% lower, that's the vaccine effectiveness they quote, for SARS-CoV-2 acquisition. But as it says, most of the people in that study had very, very mild or nearly negligible symptoms. They had very, very little symptoms. So, that's not really overwhelming proof of efficacy. I think it's a big problem that we're continuing to expand the booster program based on the EUA authorization. We need to move this all into the Biological Licensing Agreement arena, the BLA, the standard approval process for vaccines. There are other people along the way who have felt similarly. I think Marion Gruber, Phil Krause, the 2 FDA officials who resigned, felt similarly, that they felt that the booster push for everybody, every adult, for the 3rd dose was already a bit too much. I think Paul Offit, a man who develops vaccines, feels similarly. He's written a number of op-eds. I think Luciano Borro, who was the senior scientific officer at FDA, who has co-authored some of those op-eds, feels similarly. These are premier experts in vaccine safety and science who think that we are rushing into this booster conundrum. We're going to give a 4th dose this way, presumably. Will we give a 5th dose this way? Will we give a 6th dose this way? What endpoints will the company be required to sate? I see that these companies have made tremendous revenue. They have the ability to run randomized controlled trials. They can easily afford it. I see that Albert Bourla had over $20 million in take-home pay in the last year. These companies and these officials, or these people who work for these companies, they can easily afford the correct randomized controlled trial. I don't know what to think. Moving forth with a fourth dose in the absence of a well-done randomized controlled trial that measures some measure of net clinical benefit, which for me is severe disease and hospitalization, if you do it without that, you are in a dangerous situation. The last thing I would say. Walid Jalad nicely drew my attention to a research letter in JAMA that appeared in the last week, and it looked at Israel, very small data set of Israeli soldiers, but these are men in that sort of target age group that we're concerned about, myocarditis, and it puts forth a number roughly between 1 in 10K and 1 in 15K for the rate of myocarditis with dose 3. Now, that's lower than the second dose. Sure, I'll give you that. But is 1 in 15K commensurate with the benefit that those people, those men in that age group get from that third dose? Which is bigger? If you've had 2 doses in your body already and you don't have myocarditis and you get that third dose, you have a 1 in 15K chance of getting myocarditis by getting the vaccine. What's the additional hospitalization benefit for an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old man in Israel? That's a very difficult to quantify number. I haven't seen a good estimate of that, and I've looked a lot. There is no randomized controlled trial, the gold standard, to kind of estimate that number. And in the absence of that, we are inherently relegated to observational studies, but they all have huge confidence intervals. You could park a school bus in. You don't know for sure what the real point estimate of efficacy is. And they're plagued by residual confounding, the types of people who are rushing to get the booster versus those people who are not. And they're different people. We all know that. They are different people. So what am I to think? If the FDA moves forward with this, I will be blown away. I think the standards at FDA in my field of study, cancer drug policy, have been low for a long time. I worry that that's bleeding into vaccine products. I worry that there is a lot of pressure on the FDA from the companies who obviously want to give as many boosters as possible. That's their bottom line. And the White House, who has different motivations than an impartial health regulator. The White House needs to, for political expediency, make sure those cases are low just in time that we go to the voting booths this fall. I think that's the political pressure. And we cannot have that bleed into a regulatory science issue. So my overall thoughts on this, I think moving forth with a fourth dose in the healthy cohort from 18 to 65 requires overwhelming proof of evidence that you do not have. Overwhelming evidence of efficacy, randomized controlled trial data. Over 65, I still think you need randomized controlled trial data. I don't think we should give that away either without good data. And it's up to regulators to hold them, companies, feet to the fire. And if we don't, we will be setting dangerous regulatory precedents for more and more drug products with less and less evidence for broad, healthy populations. And the last thing I'd say, we can't ignore the fact that at this point, many people have had Omicron breakthroughs. They've had the virus itself, and they got 2 or 3 doses in their arm. Are you telling me that a fourth dose further reduces their risk of hospitalization and death? Further has an impact? Are you telling me that? And if so, what evidence are you marshaling to prove that to me? I don't see any evidence that would prove that to me. And that would leave me with a lot of doubt. If you have a 20-year-old who's got 3 doses and an Omicron, I have a lot of doubt that you can further reduce that person's risk of hospitalization or death from a fourth dose. Finally, it will immediately be mandated. There are a lot of people trigger happy to mandate, and they will mandate that fourth dose. And I fear that it will happen predominantly in college campuses for the people who are at the lowest risk of bad outcomes. That would be a mistake. So I think that the FDA needs to think twice about this. I think that they need to rehire Gruber and Krauss and get some common sense inserted in that agency. If we move forward with a fourth dose without the information we need, robust randomized trial powered for clinically meaningful endpoints, we'll have made a grievous error. So if you like this video, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, comment, leave a message below. Until next time.